This is Andy White with Ebogee, and I will once again be your host this morning. Thank you for joining us once again. Many of you are partners with Clearfly Communications, and also, once again, we want to thank Bob and Tom at Clearfly for helping to organize the call today. Last week we looked at, if you're with us, we looked at the basics of configuring SIP trunks. This week we want to dig a little bit deeper and look for things to check for and how to do some basic troubleshooting on your own when things don't always go as planned. Okay, and we know that happens sometimes, right? Okay, the agenda I've allowed about an hour. Not sure if we'll go that long, but we're going to look at some PBX connection options, firewall problems, methods to detect misconfigured firewalls, and maybe give you some options for dealing with those firewalls. And towards the end, hopefully we'll do get to do a packet capture tool using Wireshark. I always like to use Wireshark when I have the opportunity because that's outside of the PBX and nobody can argue with an actual packet capture, right? All right, we talked last week, if you're with us, we talked about two protocols for making voice over IP phone calls. That was the SIP protocol, which is used for registering the SIP trunk. It's used for making calls, disconnecting calls, monitoring the calls. And then, of course, for voice, there's the real-time transport protocol, which is RTP. And so that's used for carrying the voice using one of the many codecs that are available. Okay, another thing that we're going to learn about today is network address translation, or NATing. Okay, this is basically it's a function of the router or firewall. It allows all the private IPs on your network to basically share just a single public IP connection. So it's the job of the firewall and the router to be able to manage all those connections. And the way that it does that is with the port mapping. So make sure that the traffic is sent to the right users, to the right PCs, and the right IP address. Okay, so that's it has to keep track of all those connections that are going on simultaneously. So there's a couple of methods for configuring your trunk, as we discussed last week, to the to your SIP trunk, the PBX to the SIP trunk, or the ITSP as we've come to know it, right? One is a direct connection to the public internet. Okay, and that as you see here. Now you've got the PBX has the connection to the WAN port directly to the IP address. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, and then you've got the some of the advantage of doing that is the PBX is not at the mercy of an external firewall. So it doesn't need to be concerned about ports being opened. So that's a benefit. Okay, one of the disadvantages is now the PBX needs to act as its own firewall. So just the opposite there. So if it's going to be on its public IP, it has to have some firewall capabilities. And the downside of that is it's going to spend a lot of resources that aren't used for processing phone calls. So that's definitely a disadvantage. All right, this slide shows the connection to the outside to the SIP trunk, where the PBX is actually behind a firewall. So it would actually have a private IP address on its WAN port. And so any outbound messages, inbound messages, they all have to go through the firewall. The firewall will manage all those connections. both on the outbound, which is usually pretty easy, but also on the return, which is usually where the problems come into play. All right, so when it goes to do the that firewall, here's an example of the PBX using a SIP port 5060. And now as the as it goes to register or make a phone call to the SIP trunk to ClearFly, you'll see the SIP port, the messaging port from the PBX is port 5060. But as it crosses the firewall, that firewall does something unique. It changes that port number. So it changes it to something, some arbitrary number. In this case, 26, maybe as our example, 26541. So on the outside of that firewall, those messages are no longer coming from port 5060, but they're coming from 26541. Okay, so now you register to ClearFly on your account. So ClearFly has an account for Epigee, and they've got our phone number. And for that phone number, they know that if they get any calls, they need to send it to this IP address, this fictitious IP. And now the port number that it registered from, in this case, 26541. Okay, therein lies the problem. 26541. Let's say if now you're registered with them, there's no activity. 30 minutes later, you receive a call from the PSTN network for your number, and it goes and makes a call to that IP address, port 26541. Well, guess what? That port is no longer open. It's slammed shut. The firewall has done its job. It's not allowing any inbound traffic to that port number. So that's probably the majority of the problems that people will run into. So there's a couple things that have to take place. One is that port number, that port has to be kept open, the 26541. If that's the port that's going to be used by the firewall, that has to be opened at all times. So one way to do that is, and we'll look at this as one of the methods that I've seen ClearFly use and some others, is they'll just periodic with the registration of the SIP trunk, they're going to do short registrations. So every 30 seconds or so, they're going to send another message to re-register that SIP trunk. So regardless of what port it's coming from, as long as there's traffic activity going through that port, that firewall is going to keep that port open. So you're really at the mercy of that firewall, keeping that port maintained open. If there's some idle time, too much idle time, and I don't know what the timers are on each firewall, but if there's too much idle time, the port gets closed, and then your inbound calls no longer reach the system. So that's, we get those phone calls. Hey, it's, I was getting calls earlier, and now I'm not. Well, those firewalls has closed the ports on you. So one method is the short registrations. Another one is using what we call keep alive messages to keep that port open. And the other thing would be to change the settings on that firewall so it does not do this SIP port transformation, is what we call it. Excuse me, bear with me today. I've got my cough drops in hand. I've got some water here. Still fighting this cold, and a lot of so my voice is still a little bit rough. So I apologize for that. So if you hear me mute here a minute, pause it momentarily. Maybe I'm getting a drink. So anyway, the port is changing. So one way would be to get this firewall to not do that SIP port transformation, so that when it exits the firewall, it stays at port 5060 on the other side, on the egress side of the firewall. So that when we register to ClearFly, it would still be port 5060, but now you have a consistent port, and now you can open that port on that firewall if you have access to it. So, and I understand that is a problem sometimes because not everybody has access to that firewall. So now they're trying to run SIP trunks and they don't have control over the firewall. That obviously just complicates things. But if there is some consistency and you know what the port's going to be on the other side of the firewall, if it's 5060, if it's not doing the SIP transformation of the port number, then it will come back as 5060, and that's a port that you can open and forward to the PBX. So the other option on solving that problem would be to do the port forwarding. Okay, so with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the things that we can control. So I'm going to log into the PBX once again. All right, just real quickly, let's just review the configuration of the SIP trunks. Last week we configured the trunks here on my PBX. We have a voice over IP carrier wizard. In this case, it uses a virtual extension 99 to hold the account information for that SIP trunk. Okay, we look at the SIP settings, and here's the test trunk that I have with ClearFly and the server, the port number and it is performing a registration. All right, so I had to do my own troubleshooting already this morning. Last night I got ready to make some test calls, and I found out that I can receive inbound calls, but I could not make outbound calls. All right, so this is a test trunk. I thought I knew what was going on, but I didn't have the complete picture. This is a test trunk that we use here with Epigee, and my engineers also had this SIP trunk, and they've been using it for testing. So as you might guess, they had it configured and working at their office, and then I was trying to use it here at my office. So one or the other is going to win out. Okay, so that's and I've seen that before with customers. You know, that they're configuring a test account, and then they go to move it to the site, and man, that they forgot to remove it from the lab environment. All right, so that's one thing to right off the bat to look for, to make sure that you're not that trunk is not registered elsewhere. Okay, and then I ran across another problem, which I think we'll touch on. Then I could not make outbound calls, so we had to fix that this morning. So we've already been able to do some real live troubleshooting. So if we look at the SIP registration, I can see that this account, it is registered to ClearFly. And as we saw last week, that's done with the SIP registration SIP registration logs. Okay, this goes out, it registers, and okay, so here's the account. It registers, and this is one of the ones methods that I was talking about. So it registers to ClearFly, and they come back and give us the 200 OK message, and they tell us to re-register again in 30 seconds. So one of the reasons that they're doing that, such a short expiration time, typically I see an hour would be pretty much what I see most of the time. But they're using a short registration, and so imagine to keep that port open periodically. Okay, and so we can see that that registers at 32 seconds, and then it's going to do the same thing again about 30 seconds later, and it's not going to wait to the very last moment to re-register. So here it is again at 56 seconds, and it's once again registering. All right. So the other method is to use to keep that port open. I don't recall if we discussed this last week, but the other method is to use, if we go back to the account, if I look at the SIP advanced settings, there is a send keep alive messages. I'm going to enable that and maybe make this 30 seconds so it's a little bit shorter. All right, so we just give this a moment. We'll go over here. We're going to go to the system log settings, and I'm going to create a log marker and click mark all logs. Now let's review the register logs. Here's my log marker. Nothing has happened at this point. But if we give it just another 10 seconds or so, it should hopefully you'll see a what we call a keep alive message going out. Okay, there it is right on cue here. So there's our register message doing its thing. It registered OK. And now shortly after that, you're seeing this options message. This is a SIP options message. It goes out to ClearFly, and it's just a message going out to them, and they acknowledge it and respond with a 200 OK message. Okay, so that's going to occur now every 30 seconds. So that's another method that we can use to keep that port open. If you don't have control over that port, is to you can do the keep alives. Okay, so you've got short registrations, you got the SIP keep alive messages, so that's all going to keep activity on that port. And of course, that port number, as we mentioned, it's going to be a unique port number if it's doing what they call some metric natting. Okay, ideally we want it to be maintained and keep it at 50-60, but if you don't have that option, there's a couple methods. All right. And the other end, ClearFly can also be sending, and they often do, is they can also be sending those keep alive messages. So there's a lot of traffic going back and forth. So there's a good chance that that port will not be closed by your firewall. Okay, one of the best troubleshooting methods that I have found to be extremely helpful is to actually see these messages on the external side of the firewall. So obviously the first question is, how are you going to do that? You know, if you don't have, number one, if you don't have access to the firewall, or how are you going to be able to get a packet capture on the other side of the firewall? Oftentimes you won't, and you don't have that that luxury. Okay. But what you can do is I'm logged into another PBX. Okay, and the benefit of being at the other side of the PBX is now I can look at SIP messages as they come from the PBX that might be having the issue. Okay, so what I've done is I'm logged into another PBX, and this is one of my best troubleshooting methods, and I've been able to resolve many problems by doing it this method. Okay. I've been on the phone and many people have said, oh yeah, the firewall, it's set correctly. Okay, you can't take their word for it. But trust me, believe me, especially if they're using SonicWall, that they don't know how to get these settings correct. It seems like I've been on the phone even with SonicWall engineers and they still didn't get it right. You pull out a packet capture and they can't argue with a packet capture or some proof that it's still. So the proof is always, sometimes you have to prove it to the other side, prove your case that the problem still exists, all right? So what I've done is I made a call routing entry, just dialing the digit 7 and some digits, and it's going to make a call out to another PBX. So let's see what that looks like. First thing I want to do is set a log marker, which I always do, and this one I'll call 1, and I'll do the same thing at the other end. So system log settings, the far end, we set our log marker. Okay, now I can dial some digits beginning with the digit 7. I really don't care what these digits are, and I really don't care if the call even completes, right? So I'll dial 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Number dial does not exist.
Number dial doesn't exist. Okay, that's what I figured. All right, so I don't think I need to look at the originating end. I want to jump right in. I want to look at the receiving end. So if I look at the log marker, call 1, I see I get an incoming call. It tells me the IP address from where that call is coming from, which port number it's coming from. So that right there tells me that this firewall that I'm behind is not doing symmetric NATing, which is a good thing. All right, and it's being sent, this call is actually being sent to this IP address to a different port number, 50603. That's the port number for this device. Remember last week I told you the port numbers between two devices, they don't have to match up. Just because Clearfly uses 5060 doesn't mean you have to use 5060. All right, so I can see there it's coming in from the correct port number. I take a look at my contact information. That was the correct number. That's my Apogee SIP number. It's coming from the correct IP, port 5060. And down here at the bottom is the audio. So this is going to be important too. So this is where the audio is going to be sent. Once the far end receives the call, they're going to be sending the audio to that IP address, port number 7006. And it's going to be using G.711. It responds with trying, and then the system responds with a not found. Basically, it doesn't find that number that I tried to call. Not surprising. Okay. Now what I want to do is talk about our NAT traversal settings. So when this call leaves, actually let's go back and look at this call as it left this office. This is the originating office. Okay, the first part of this call is once again this collecting digits from the phone. So it's collecting digits. Now it makes the outbound call. And by the way, you can see, if the other end is busy, you're having problems trying to locate the call, maybe your log marker has already gone by, you could always search for the call ID. So that call ID from the originating end is going to be found and match the caller ID at the far end. And the sequence number has got to match up to their sequence number 287. So there's a way to stitch these calls together to find your call out of many calls that might be going on at that time. So when the call left, again, you had the correct IP address, and for both the SIP messaging and also for the voice using port 5060. The system's on a private network. Okay, you can see that because the message actually came from a 192.168 IP address. So how did it know to populate this contact field with the correct public IP address? Okay, the method for doing that, we refer to it as NAT, network address translation, NAT traversal. So it's the job of the PBX to basically figure out what the IP, the public IP address is on the other side of the firewall. So let's see how it does that. All right, excuse me. So in the Apogee PBX, we go to telephony and we go to NAT traversal settings. It is enabled. If I turn this off, and now let's go make a new call. I might have shown this last week, can't remember. So let's go we'll make a new call, new log marker, redial. Number dial does not exist. I'm going to search for call 2. Again, we're collecting digits from the phone, and now we make the outbound call. You notice the contact information has now changed. It shows my contact as being the 192.168.1.185 IP address. Not only does it do it there, but it also does it here on the for the voice. Okay, so that's a problem. So if I enable the NAT traversal, it's going to populate it with the correct public IP address and port number. Okay, it's going to, if we look under SIP parameters, there's 2 methods to determine what the SIP port is. Remember, we're trying to figure out, the goal here is to figure out what the IP address is, and not only that, but what the port number is on the other side of the firewall. So it has to do that for both for voice, for SIP, which is your messaging port 5060, and then it also needs to find out what's going on with the voice ports, the RTP ports, which is a whole range of ports, not just a single port. So one of the methods is to use what we call a stun server. The stun server is sitting out there, and there's many of them. It's just sitting out there on a public IP. And if we look at our stun parameters, you can see that for this system, we're using stun.epigee.com. It's a port number. If we're going to send messages to it, you got to send it to port 3478, and then there's a secondary. Always recommend, if you're using stun server, especially it's just, if that's what you're relying on for your traffic and to figure out what to navigate through the firewall, make sure you've got a secondary stun server out there as well. They're free. You don't have to sign up for it or anything. But our stun server has been up and running for years, and it's been down maybe a couple hours, very short time. But the time that it went down, I got to hear from a lot of customers, hey, we can't make outbound calls, this and that. So make sure you have a backup configured in there. And the job of the stun server, you can read more about it after the call or whatever, but the job of the stun server is it's basically just echoing back what it sees. We send out a message, in this case port 5060, out to the stun server and ask the question, okay, what IP address did this message come from? And so the stun server has to answer two questions. What IP address is the message coming from, and what port number is that message coming from? And it will report back, and the PBX will use that information. So if it sends out 5060 and comes back 5060, it knows it's not doing symmetric natting. If it comes back as something else, it knows that, hey, there's symmetric natting in play. We're no longer going to use port 5060 in our messages, but we're going to use this other arbitrary port that the firewall has chosen to give us. So you would be able to identify that on your any of your outbound messages. It would populate with the port number that it sees. In this case, it's matching up. 5060 is 5060. The other method, and this can be used if you actually have access to that firewall and you've been able to manually open port 5060, you can specify in here what the actual IP address, the public IP address is, and port number. So that way, when those outbound calls go, it's going to populate that contact field with that whatever IP you put in here and port number that you enter in there. I'll say that setting because I know it's good. Okay, the same thing has to take place for the voice ports, but with the voice ports you have a range of ports. In this case, 7,000 to 7,255. So there's a range of 256 ports, and the stun server will go out and check for those ports as well. All right, so what happens when your NAT traversal is not set up correctly? All right, so let's go back here to the general settings. I'm going to disable the NAT traversal. And we're going to make a phone call. Again, we'll call this call 2. Let's do call 3. We already have a call 2. And I'll do the same thing at the far end. This is call 3. And I'm also at the far end, I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm going to do a packet capture. And we'll catch everything on, we'll just use the WAN interface. All right, that's running. So now I'm making a call. That was quick. I can stop the packet capture. And I'll download the packet capture. While that's downloading, let's go back and look at the logs on the receiving end. Okay, this was call 3. Okay, at the receiving end, remember we turned off the NAT traversal, so now that the information comes through at the public or at the private IP address, sorry. So that's my contact information. Here's the audio. It says, okay, send the audio back to the to this particular port number. I'm going to make I'm going to make a call so we can actually hear some audio coming back. Let's do this again. We'll do it call 4. I actually want to hear some audio so we can see where it's going and what that looks like. I think that'd be much more helpful. All right, I'll call to the auto attendant this time. 720530. And I'm getting silence, okay? But if we look, the call's connected to this auto attendant. I'm getting silence. There's nothing coming in to me. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm gonna hang up that call. All right, call's disconnected. Let's go back here, do the packet capture, stop, and we'll open up. So now you get the one-way audio. So there's many causes for problems with one-way audio. There's a lot of reasons for it, I should say. So we did the packet capture on this last call, and if I go to telephony, if I look at VoIP calls, it opens another window. You see it found one call, and I'm going to look at the flow sequence. Actually, let's play streams. That's always fun. We can play the audio. And there it is. So there you go. There's how easy it is to capture the audio of a VoIP call if it's using G711. And now I'm going to hit, you see there's 2 streams here, one in blue, one in black. The blue is coming from the far end system back to me. And then this is originating from my office to the far end office. There's your port numbers at both ends for voice, 6062 at one end, 7024 at the other end. All right, so let's push play. Okay. I don't think you're able to hear that because it's coming across on my headset. But this is it's playing out the audio for the auto attendant, and this in black was is my voice as we're talking. So I've got voice going to the far end. I can hear the auto attendant, at least from the packet capture. It's leaving the far end, but I'm not hearing it here at my desk as I made the call. I do not hear the auto attendant. Okay, so if you take a look at your packet capture, one of the options that it has here, it says flow sequence. So I'm going to open that, and let's go to a full screen. Might be able to see it a little bit better, and I can expand it. So this is the messaging information. Gives it to you in a nice little diagram, a flow chart, I guess. And you can see the invite coming in. The response is a trying, a ringing in the opposite direction, and then the call gets answered with a 200 OK message. We acknowledge that the call was answered, and then we begin to send the voice in one direction to the other. Well, look where this PBX is sending its audio to. Oh, it's there. It's sending it out. It's leaving the WAN port, but it's being sent to 192.168.1.185. That's the private IP address of my PBX. That is not going to make it across the internet. It has to be sent to the public IP address. The port number is correct. but it's not going to make it. It's never going to make it to the far end because obviously that's a private network. Okay, I'm going to close this. Let's just check for protocol here. Okay, one thing that we talked about is another problem that we've encountered. Excuse me. Is here's the invite of that call that came in. You notice the this, if I take a look at this down further and we expand on it, and we look at the protocol down here in blue, it says it's using UDP, User Datagram Protocol, UDP. Okay, so there's so UDP is works great. It's, you know, that's what most of your SIP trunks will use. But there's one problem with the UDP, and that you know, there's well, in general, there's a size limitation to the packet size. Okay, and here at the top, you can see this header. It says the length. It's 898 bytes. Okay, we've run into problem when usually when you have to send out when you send out an outbound call, and the other end is going to authenticate that call, then you have to send the two invites. The second invite containing all the authorization information, and you know, there's a lot of information on that second invite. Well, sometimes that invite is too large. The largest packet size that's going to pass through most of the routers is going to be 1500 bytes. So if it's larger than that, then it's not going to pass through. It might not pass through the firewall or router, I should say. All right, so so what will happen is you'll see this invite broken up into two different packets. Okay, with UDP, there's no method to reassemble those packets. So the call, it doesn't, the call doesn't complete. And the far end will say, well, they didn't get the second invite with the authorization information. Well, it might be there, but it's just broken, it's fragmented. It came in as 2 bytes, or 2 packets rather than 1. With the largest packet size being 1500, it exceeded it. Now it's in 2 packets. With if that's the case, if you do run across that, then you can often switch to TCP, and most providers are okay with using TCP. Although one of the larger ones out there, we've seen they actually refuse to use TCP and say, even though it says that in the RFC, that they've got to be able to accept the larger packets and switch to TCP. They don't accept it. So that becomes a bit of a problem. So that's hopefully you don't run across that one too often. But it is out there. But you can use your packet capture here to see the size of that packet, and that would also help you. All right. This morning, let's just finish up. Just about done. Let me remove the packet capture. This morning, I ran across a problem because the account was registered at a different location than mine, and once they removed that, they deleted the account on the other end. I was able to register, and I was able to once again receive inbound calls, but I wasn't able to make outbound calls. Okay, so let me take a look at why. So I'm going to label this one test 1, and this will be a good call. I can even say good. Okay, I dial 9-692-1166. That should go out.
Welcome to
Okay,
Effigy
it did.
Technology.
All right, I'll drop that one off. And now I'm going to change one setting. And we're going to make a comparison between a good call and a failed call. What can happen if your account information is not correct? So this extension 99, it has the account settings on it. Well, I'm trying to, if I look in the SIP advanced settings, there's a field here called authentication username. And in there it has the account information. Okay, I had omitted that. It's not populated when we do the VoIP carrier wizard. It doesn't automatically populate it. You have to enter that setting. So let's go back without that information. And we'll call this one test 2 bad. All right, if I redial,
Check your external.
oops, check your external line. So it means it failed over to the FXO ports. And there's no FXO ports. So if I look at test 1, actually this is test 2. This is again collecting digits from the phone. All right, and in the account information, it's got the phone number. When we go to authenticate, it has the username as the DID number, okay, rather than the account name. So with that being said, let's look at the bad call, or the good call. Oops, should be there, test 1. This is the good call. And we go to authenticate the call. In this case, it actually had the username set correctly. So without that, obviously without the correct username, the call would fail. All right, so I think that I want to just finish up here with a couple more slides. And this week I'm going to open it up here at the end for any questions. So just with regards to Epigee, once again, for those that we do have some newcomers on the call, we're an American company designing, developing products from the ground up since the year 2000. Okay, I've been with Epigee now probably over 18 years. It's a long time. So we've got a lot of history. We were one of the first VoIP products on the market. We developed the complete product, all the hardware design, circuit board layout, all that was developed 100% by Epigee, as well as our software. Okay, which is unusual these days. A lot of people just buy servers and throw the software on a server and let it run. All right, we have on-premise PBXs like the QX line that we've been looking at, and we have the cloud-based ECQX. Also have the ECMON services, which is ideal for tool for managing the networks, keeping track of your backups, your configuration files, all your systems out there, you can get access to them. All right, so we have products based on the number of extensions or IP lines that you're going to configure in the office, but we also have offer products now just recently announced by the number of simultaneous calls. Great for, like a hotel where you've got a lot of endpoints, but not very many calls going on. So our value proposition: mature, reliable, secure. A lot of people buy the system based on the security enhancements that we've added, that we've put into this system. Feature rich, cost effective, and obviously compatible with almost all endpoints. As long as they're SIP-based, it should work. And trunk providers such as Clearfly, who does a excellent job. We really appreciate them. And also our philosophy of service. Our goal is to personally assist you guys in helping your customers. All right, here's some contact information. Always reach out to our sales team. Also, I know a couple of people did take us up on the offer last week to register and actually use the free cloud option, or at least to trial it for a month. And you reach us through our email, and my email is andy.white@epig.com. So I appreciate everyone's attendance today, and we will open it up for the any questions here just momentarily. All right, thank you so much, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Let me just close off